Hello and welcome to Hawkeye Nation. This is HawkCast, your Iowa football, basketball, and recruiting podcast brought to you by Hawkeye Beacon and Rivals.com. I am your lead analyst and host, Elliot Clough, at Elliot Clough on Twitter, joined by publisher of the site, Adam Jacoby, here on this Saturday afternoon after an Iowa victory 29 to 13 over Maryland in College Park. Before we get started talking about that, drop that subscribe, click that button for us, drop a comment, drop a like there on YouTube as well. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, make sure that you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode and leave that rate and review. Helps us out a lot. All of those things. We greatly appreciate it night in and night out and day in and day out on this podcast, depending on whenever you're listening. But big day for Shaggy. Jackson Stratton goes 10 of 14 for 76 yards, no turnovers, only sacked once. Shaggy, expectations I don't think were going to be super high for this guy going into this game for anybody, but he went out there and he did his job. He did all you asked him to do, and they won by 16 points. Like I said in the outline, Adam, Shaggy, have a day, man.
Yeah, absolutely have a day. And this is a credit to Stratton. It's a credit to Tim Lester. It's a credit to Kirk Ferentz. And I got to say, it's a credit to the offensive line and Kaleb Johnson in the backfield because ultimately, what all happened was Stratton was put into position to succeed by the fact that Iowa had a run game that could control the pace, control the tempo. Stratton had easier throws to make, and like you mentioned in the four downs recap, there were times in the second quarter, especially late in that half, where Lester trusted Stratton enough to take those shots deep, and no, they didn't connect, but Maryland had to account for that too, and so that helped keep Iowa sort of in that position of controlling the tempo of the game for the rest of the game. And I thought that was really impressive. And so a real credit to how the team prepared for this game.
Yeah, I gave a shout out to Lester in four downs as well. I mean, I think he called a fantastic game, all things considered. The first throws, a majority of Stratton's throws were to the sidelines, and that's a situation where, like, if it's a comeback route or a hitch, you run the risk of a pick, right? Mostly in man, but they were playing zone, so they found the holes in the zone, and he allowed him to make throws to the opposite sideline from the opposite hash, like from the left hash to the right sideline. I think there was a couple throws to Gill and to Bowie in there, and so not only are those, I wouldn't call them tough throws, I wouldn't call them easy throws. They're simple throws. Simple, not necessarily easy, and they're made easier by Stratton, who has that arm talent. He can whip it. Like, he's not Deacon Hill. He's actually accurate. You know, he's not going to throw it through the guy's chest either. But Stratton has the arm talent to make the throw, and that's a throw that gives him confidence moving forward in making the bigger throws that open things up. And no, you mentioned they didn't connect, but he was damn close on both of those throws. And if it's something that he continues to do or they need to do against Nebraska, he's got to have a hell of a lot more confidence than he did otherwise. And other thing regarding Stratton, if we're talking about confidence, if we're talking about where he's at mentally, he did not have happy feet today at all. And that was a huge indicator for Lester that he's starting to figure things out and to be more confident under center. I mean, this is, I wrote Drew Stevens' masterclass in the post game, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But I think this was a Tim Lester masterclass, to tell you the truth. I mean, the play designs, the throws by Stratton, and it becomes a masterclass after 2 weeks of work with Stratton too, in the bye week and then leading up to this game, and the team really rallying around him. I mean, you could see it in the post game stuff, like the photos with Brennan Sullivan, or in the locker room, the photos of them giving him, the water the shower that they do when they celebrate. I mean, I talked to Jackson when he first made his decision to transfer to Iowa this summer. If you want to check that out, then I'll put that in the description here. But and you could say this Tim Lester masterclass even goes back to then, right? Like, he saw those traits, even though the Stratton didn't put up great stats at Colorado State. Lester saw traits that he could work with, brought him in for depth purposes, and it's paid off.
Yeah, and it has been especially nice because Iowa really was not in the position where they could just waste a roster spot with a quarterback, and they really saw that at the end of last season too. So that was a hard-won lesson for the Hawkeyes, and so with a much deeper QB room and guys that they could look at as long-term projects like Stratton, who had originally been a Washington recruit. You know, they knew that there was the foundation, the blueprints, the bones of a good house there, so to speak. And the fact that they are able to lean on a kid who has years of experience. He turns 21 in March. We're not talking about a freshman walk on. We're not talking about somebody who was in high school last year and is still adjusting to the pace of the college game. At the
We're
very
we're not
least,
we're not talking about Tommy Paholski, right?
Yeah, yeah. For lack of a better term, we're not talking about Tommy Paholski. We're talking about a kid who has impressed college coaches, has earned that P5, at that time P5 offer, and all of that. So at the very least, he's got enough of a pedigree that you can, hope that you roll a six on a game like this in an emergency situation. And it really does seem like Iowa got the best performance possible out of a situation like this, a fourth string walk on QB with a bye week to prepare for being the starter. You really cannot ask for much more, if anything more, out of Stratton than what they got today.
Like I said, I think I might have listed off the stats: 10 of 14 for 76 yards, zero turnovers, just one sack. So for all the things that he did today, no turnovers in your first start is awesome.
Yeah.
I really think we can't let that fly under the radar. 10 of 14, I mean, it's not, like I've said, it's not setting the world on fire, but like what was what was Cade doing through the air? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. And imagine if that's 5 for 14 instead. Like that could have gone sideways in a hurry. So
right. Yeah. And to boot, Kirk post game said that he will more than likely start against Nebraska and that it's his group now. And there were some things that were said on another podcast, and what I will provide here is that we're not saying anything definitive regarding the quarterback situation and the former starter, but um, I believe it will be Jackson Stratton this coming week. And I think the way the team has rallied around him is reflective of the quarterback situation. Why don't we? You think that's a good way to put it, Adam?
I would say so. And I think the real proof, the real test is going to be the vote on captains for the Nebraska game, which we'll find out shortly. The fact that
Logan Jones.
and I really do expect it to be Logan Jones too. And ultimately, the whispers that we heard, and they weren't reportable whispers per se, but the whispers that we had heard, and they were consistent with reading between the lines of Kirk Ferentz at the press conference on Tuesday. And they were consistent with what some of the other reporters and some of the other podcasters have said too, right? This was not only smoke but fire coming from inside the program building in Iowa City. That's just the fact of it. And so the fact is that Kirk Ferentz here, with the lights probably still on at SECU Stadium there in College Park, and already saying, yeah, this is going to be Stratton next week. That, I think, tells you everything you need to know about who has been taking care of that QB position. And I am sympathetic to McNamara and the concussion symptoms that he's talking about. And you really do want traumatic brain injuries to be cared for in terms, thinking in terms of long term and short term and winning football games and all that. I get that. I completely get that. And if this is something that is genuinely, sticking with him, like these are lingering symptoms, which he said is often normal in his statement that he put on we'll just say it on non-University of Iowa letterhead. That is more notable than I think people think. But even with that sort of situation, the fact is that you don't get the sense from anybody in the program that they're able to depend on Cade McNamara, that they think he's going to be ready for that season finale. And that is sort of hard to miss at this point. So it'd be great if we're wrong. For Cade McNamara's sake, if he comes back, takes back that QB1 role, just rolls Nebraska on senior day and gets carried out on everybody's shoulders, that'd be fantastic. That would be A1, like way to go. This whole transfer and this whole drama thing, at the very least, it ends on a high note. I am not optimistic for that scenario. and and there's a lot of different points in that scenario where I'm like, yeah, well, there's a lot of wells in front of that scenario. So, and you really just get the sense that Ferentz, the Iowa staff, are not going to be patient in the way that they were at the beginning of the season for this. Like it really does sort of seem like things have sort of run out a little bit for Cade. And it's a bummer. It's a shame. It's too bad. But the fact that Ferentz is putting so much trust so quickly in Stratton, um, that when he's got a 6-year senior quarterback in the room, allegedly cleared, says a lot.
It does. It does. And with that said, I suppose we can move on to the running game here. Kaleb Johnson also, like normally this is what we'd lead with, right? But Stratton coming out and having the performance he had, too notable to pass on that. So got to give Kaleb Johnson his flowers. He 35 carries, I think 164 yards and a touchdown. That's the most carries he's had in a game by 10. He sets the single season scoring record, rushing touchdowns record with 21 on the ground, surpassing Sean Green, who had 20 in 2008. Like we've been talking about Sean Green and the comparisons all season. Kaleb is doing this with far fewer carries, and he just looks like an NFL running back. Not saying that Sean didn't, because Sean definitely did, and he was for a little while. Kaleb looks like a low first, high second draft pick, high second day draft pick right now, and what he's doing, and to take this team and put it on his shoulders with all this controversy, and a guy who decided to play it out, who's probably going to be the highest pick out of every Hawkeye on this roster. I mean, it's hard to look at this game and not be impressed with what he's done, not only in this game, but throughout the season. Like this is if Ashton Genty wasn't Ashton Genty, it's just like hand him the Doak Walker Award right now, and just to continue to do it, to take the blows, 35 carries again, that is a ton, and he never takes that many. So to enter this game with that chip on his shoulder, to still put this performance forward without your starting right tackle and arguably probably your best offensive lineman, that's impressive.
Yeah, I was not expecting Kaleb to have such a bell cow day because, as you mentioned, he broke his personal record for carries by like what 10. And you can't really expect Iowa to say, "Oh yeah, they'll just give it to him 35 times." They've never done it more than 25. But yeah, this week will be different. But they had to do that this week. And ultimately, we're talking about a team that had 72 plays from scrimmage. 58 of them were runs. And as it turns out, Kaleb Johnson got his number called exactly half the time. 35 runs, one catch. That's 36 out of 72. And he had basically half the team's yards from scrimmage, 170 out of 344, and 10 of the team's 20 first downs. Like Kaleb Johnson was half the team's offense all by himself. And again, like you said, didn't have Jennings Dunker to do it. Had a fourth string um, quarterback, and everybody knew in that stadium, everybody knew Iowa was going to have to lean on Kaleb Johnson to win this game. And from the get go, They gave him the ball 7 times on the very first drive, 4 first downs on those rushes. Now, ultimately, it was like Moulton fumbled, scoreless drive, but they set the tone for the game when everybody knew that the way to stop this Iowa offense is to stop Kaleb Johnson. And with Jackson Stratton at quarterback, they're still like, nope, we're still going to feed him. We're still going to get this done. And, he was productive from the get go. 22 rushes for over 100 yards in the first half. That is setting the tone. That is, planting your flag at their 50-yard line and saying, no, this is Kaleb Johnson's game. This one belongs to him. And, he didn't get that big run at the end. That was Kamari Moulton to also get over 100 yards for the first time since, what was it, a decade or so? Oh, no, 8 seasons, 2016, Nebraska. But that was also, give Kaleb Johnson a little bit of an assist on that one just for being such a workhorse, such an engine, and also, give some credit to the offensive line too. But that was a tired Terps defense that Kamari Moulton was running through at the very end. And if you saw the angle from the back end zone, and he barely even had to cut back on that. It was just the hole kept opening up. There was one defender out of position. And when you're as athletic as Moulton, boom, gone. 68 yards. Game was effectively over at that point. So it's a credit to Moulton, credit to the offensive line, and credit to just the way that Iowa controlled the game, controlled the physicality for all 60 minutes.
Yes, and for Moulton to bounce back after that fumble, I think was really really telling of him and his future at Iowa. Honestly, additionally, Lester going right back to him and showing that trust in him, like he was showing in Stratton, I thought was really telling. It's like, look, dude, you made that and that was 100% on Moulton. Stratton put
Yeah.
it right there. And that was a really bad fumble, especially after the offense was driving. And I think that was telling of Stratton too, to just go right back there and get into a rhythm and lead them down the field and score, you know? And I think that first one is just a field goal, but still, like, I for him to not be rattled and to just go out there. And one thing that we were told this week, and we shared with premium subscribers, is that uh, that Stratton is a very likable guy, and he has those quarterback vibes to him. And we talked about Iowa rallying around him, and I think we really just saw that today. And I think we saw his leadership today too.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that Iowa is able to rally around guys that are that far down on the depth chart, that they are able to create that bond with teammates. And we saw a bit of that with Brendan Sullivan in the early part of this season, the summer camp and all that, when you were walking into a situation where you don't have those years of experience with the playbook. And it turns out nobody does on this team with Tim Lester, which in an odd way sort of helps the backups because there isn't that institutional knowledge with the coaches, years and years of that they have to sort of break through or get past with the incumbents. But ultimately still you are walking into a locker room that you've never been part of before. You're playing a position where everybody is leaning on you, trusting you. And you are still 20 years old, you're a redshirt sophomore, your career has not gone the way that you expected it to for a lot of reasons. And to still be able to prepare to really be in the, I guess, sort of mental space, which is a big thing for quarterbacks, but to be in that mental space, to step into that role, to sort of finish out the game against UCLA, to use that bye week to get those snaps that you were never going to get as a fourth string QB with those ones and twos, those things, and to be able to capitalize on those opportunities when you get them. And we've said it 3 or 4 times on this podcast already, but it is such a credit to Tim Lester. And I am really, I don't think that Brian Ferentz ever earned that sort of benefit of the doubt for getting guys, you know microwaving, for lack of a better term, guys into position to play and succeed so quickly.
Yeah, you saw my face, Adam. The
Yeah.
the listeners and watchers did not, but I went, Hell no. No. For Leicester to step up and do that over these last few weeks, I think is I it's impressive, man. And I think it speaks to Leicester's demeanor and his ability to adjust and adapt, which are two words that I don't think are in Brian's vocabulary, especially as an offensive coordinator. So, again, really impressed with Leicester. And, we were from the start, but for him to do what he's done these last few weeks with different quarterbacks and Iowa to go out and win, it's just really impressive.
Yeah, especially because at the beginning of the season or the off season and all that we can go off of is the way that these coaches talk, right? And Lester was an impressive talker, but and you could tell that he had a very genuine good faith approach to all of that. And that's what you want to see and hear out of a coach, but ultimately it has to translate on the field. And there's only so much that you can understand from press conferences and interviews and all of that to understand how it's going to um, translate on the field. And after a decade of things not translating on the field, there's a lot of scar tissue built up, especially from this Iowa fan base. And so the fact that you're able to see the results of the coaching, you're able to see the progress, you're able to see the fact that this guy comes in with such a granular approach to things like mechanics, and you're able to see these guys improve mechanically over the course of the season. I mean, that is exactly what a fan base wants to see out of a first year coordinator. That is exactly what you want to see. And yeah, this has been a higher. I know a lot of people scoffed at the fact that Tim Lester was not Kevin Johns, for lack of a better term, and so the fact that
Us included.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yep.
And we got to mention that Johns is already a co-OC at Oklahoma, so he's doing well for himself. But Lester really does seem like the best fit for the situation that could have come in. It seems like he was exactly what this roster, this coaching staff, this QB room needed, much more than a guy who is able to use, like call some fun plays for 4 and 5 star talent. Well, okay, great, but Brian Ferentz was able to do that too. And he was a successful NFL tight ends coach. Like he knows how to deal with or how to coach for elite talent. He does not know how to coach college talent in a developmental program. He just doesn't. The track record is there. Tim Lester seems like the coach that you want in a developmental program. Period.
Speaking of developmental program, I was unmuted and then I muted my mic instead of the other way around. My bad. Speaking of a developmental program, Iowa really looked good. Well, looked good in the first half defensively, and then held strong in the second half defensively. There were moments in the first half where they just looked like themselves, right? They looked dominant. Second half, they got taken advantage of through the air a little bit with Ty Helton, who's a future NFL receiver. I think he has over 90 receptions on the year now. So, stuff like that's inevitably going to happen. I know our board immediately got so negative when that stuff was going on. It's fans. That's just the way it's supposed to be. But I was personally impressed with the defensive performance through the air. They only allowed 129 yards and had 2 interceptions with Deshaun Lee and TJ Hall as their starting corners. Now, we know TJ has had his rough bits of the year and did today even, but that pick that he had, that one-handed interception, was nasty. And I honestly thought it locked the game up at that point in time. Ultimately, there was a few other plays that did that, but TJ making that grab had to feel incredibly not only just like satisfying to make that play in itself, right? Like an interception's a big deal no matter what, but for him to go through all those struggles, the penalties, the Nebraska game, however many years, a couple years ago, 2 years ago, and to now to make that interception against, I think it was Prather, who's also probably going to fight for a spot in the NFL. for him to do that, I was really impressed. You could see the huge smile on his face too. I mean, it was the same thing for what it was Deshaun Lee a couple weeks ago when he got it. I think it was against Northwestern where he got that pick. But TJ Hall, that's one of those plays where you look at it and even as objective journalists, big J journalists like we are, you have to say, oh, okay, I'm happy for that guy. Nice play, man.
Yeah, that was it. It had to have been incredibly gratifying for Hall, especially with the way that he has struggled over the course of the season, getting benched and, having tough times on special teams as well. And so, yeah, the one of the things that we were told in the first coordinator bye-week press conference, because I asked about TJ Hall because he had had a rough game the week prior. And I asked LeVar Woods about, how do you coach a guy through tough games? And he said, I am a big TJ Hall fan. And some of that might have sounded like, lip service to fans who did not want to see Hall on the field ever again. I get that. But coaches don't normally praise players that way idly or emptily. That spoke to a lot of mental resilience by TJ Hall. And you could tell that all of that in sort of keeping himself engaged, keeping himself focused, not, saying, well, I things haven't gone the way that I wanted them to. Better put out a written statement on Microsoft Word. No,
Oh, okay. You said it, not me. All right. Go ahead, Adam.
that's that's a little Easter egg for anyone who's still listening after 40 minutes. No, like it takes a lot of mental resiliency to get back out on that field and say, all right, throw at me again, bro. I got a short memory. I'm a defensive back, and yeah, that had to have felt good for him. And it's something to build on for next year because there will not be a Jermari Harris on the roster next season for, Hall to be behind on the depth chart. And there will still be a competition. My guess is they will bring in at least one cornerback from the portal because they're probably going to have to. But some of that is going to be competition for TJ Hall as opposed to guys who are definitely going to be above TJ Hall on the depth chart, right? That calculus is different now. And it speaks to his resilience. It speaks to the way the coaches have kept coaching him up, have kept building on the successes. And, ultimately it's trust being rewarded and showing up and working every day. And, Jermari Harris was this inconsistent this early in his career too. He's mentioned that in the interviews, and TJ even mentioned that to us in his availabilities earlier this season. Like he's been talking to other guys on the team who have their own histories of inconsistency. Ultimately, it's what you do the next game, the next season. So yeah, a lot to build on today for TJ Hall. And if this is his springboard to a great senior season, fantastic, and he has worked hard for it.
Riley Moss wasn't great to start either. So
Yeah,
happens all the
I,
time.
I was I was genuinely sure that Riley Moss was not a Big Ten cornerback his first 2 years on the field, mind you. I was like, no, he is not physical enough for Big Ten play, and he proved me wrong. And physicality is a much more structural thing than learning the ins and outs and the mechanics of playing cornerback too. Like Hall is a lot closer to being a an NFL caliber cornerback. TJ Hall is closer to being an NFL cornerback right now than Riley Moss was his first and second year as a Hawkeye. I am firmly in that camp. And so he's got to put it together now himself, the way that Riley Moss put it together for himself, the way that Jermari Harris put it together for himself. Now, this opportunity is here for TJ Hall. Can he take advantage of it now too? Luckily, he's got Phil Parker coaching him, and you really can't ask for anybody better than that to prepare you for the NFL.
Indeed, indeed. And one more guy that, well, all things considered, we definitely have to talk about is Jay Higgins, who sustained a hamstring. We believe it was a hamstring injury. We know it was a leg injury at the very least against UCLA and missed, I think it was just the second half, maybe 2.5 quarters against the Bruins a couple weeks ago. Didn't really practice over these last 2 weeks, but planned to go against Maryland and led the team in tackles. had what was the game-sealing interception later in the game too. Benefited off Max Llewellyn and Ethan Hurkett were awesome today. Like Max
Yeah.
Llewellyn has all the physical tools to make it happen, and that spin move of his is just deadly. And Ethan Hurkett was all over the field. Y.A. Black continues to be awesome. I wish it would show up more so on the stat sheet for YA because he's probably the best defensive tackle in the Big Ten, or is
You
that
could
restricted?
really, you could really make a case for YA. And the nice thing is, the stats might not show up, especially in this college system, but somebody with his talent, size, and just general consistency and motor, he is going to have, as long as he stays healthy and keeps his head on straight, and he seems like the kind of kid who has his head on very straight. As long as he stays healthy, he's going to have himself a pretty decent NFL career. And that is commas, baby, plural. So ultimately, like when you're collecting NFL paychecks, the how much you showed up on the stat sheet as a defensive tackle in college sort of falls by the wayside a little bit. I agree, he really deserves his flowers more than is ever going to show up to people who are not watching the game and watching the line specifically. But I think his football career is in its early stages, and that's going to be good for him, and it's going to be good for whatever NFL team or teams decide to give him a job for a while.
To revert back to Jay Higgins, I
Yeah,
really thought that was poetic justice that he got that interception. He's dealing with the injury, clearly also has an NFL future career, and for him to benefit off that, and this is a guy that I was told is, and I don't think this is a surprise to anybody, so I'm not necessarily breaking news, but dying to get back out on the field. That's, you know, from what we're told an Iowa Hawkeye should be, to me, that's Jay Higgins. I think he epitomizes that, what the program preaches. So, and as a guy that is it the gavel? Is that the award is that what we
the
call it?
Golden Gavel.
The
Yeah,
Golden Gavel. For those of you who don't know, the media gives an award to a player that we believe was, I guess, the best with the media over the year and like fair and consistent. And um, I voted for Logan Jones this year just to mix it up because he's been awesome night in or day in and day out with us with the media, and I post videos of him frequently because he's funny too. But Jay could get that award every year. He got it last year. And it's hard, especially with his dad, Hawk, Roy, who's so fun on Twitter and a really good guy, really nice guy, that we've
yeah.
met. Hard not to root for guys like that. And like I said, poetic justice. And I don't mean to hammer anymore on the folks that are sitting out, but Jay doesn't strike me as a player that would do that unless his leg had been broken or, ripped off. Like, you know,
Yeah, as long as he felt like he could benefit the team more by being out there than by being on the bench, he was going to be out there.
yeah.
And that is just the sort of guy that he is. And you talk about his dad, but his dad very, very clearly instilled some hard work ethic in him. And
Shout out to mom too. Well, she doesn't get much because
no,
Roy
she
is such a
doesn't.
personality, but
Yeah,
shout out
yeah,
to
it's
Mama Higgins too.
yeah, absolutely. And that is the sort of thing that could not happen without two parents reinforcing it at home and raising a good kid ultimately. And yeah, and Elliot, you mentioned we've been around Roy, and he is like that all the time. Uh whether or not anyone's reading on Twitter or this or that, that's the kind of guy he is. And to a large extent, you could say the same thing about Jay. And everything that we hear about coaches when Jay's not around, sort of the same thing. It's just a almost psychotic approach to getting better as a linebacker. The comparisons to Ray Lewis that seemed really out of place at the beginning of the season seem less out of place now because he has been a markedly better linebacker this year. The tackle stats might not show it, but I would say Jay Higgins, especially as a coverage linebacker, has been markedly better this year than he was last year. And whether or not that translates into postseason awards, accolades, this or that, ultimately, I'm not sure that's going to matter a whole lot because he's a better linebacker. It's going to make him a better NFL player, right? Like I think he is better suited for the NFL now than he was 12 months ago. So, does Iowa want to be 7-4 right now? No, but this has still been a almost I'm not sure there's a way to spin this in a way that coming back for his senior season wasn't the best, or his sixth year season wasn't the best move for Jay Higgins. Like it seems like an unqualified success for him.
Yeah, I mean, to quantify the improvement in coverage, I mean, he leads the team in interceptions with four.
Yeah, leads all FBS linebackers with
Oh
four, as a
wow.
matter of fact. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Shout out to the Hawkeye game notes.
he ought to be unanimous in my opinion this year. Probably should have been last year too. Probably should have won the Buck. He wasn't even a finalist for the Buckus Award. That's not happening
No,
time around. So
no, those non like sexy positions, linebacker, offensive line, those unless you are making ridiculous plays on a regular basis, the accolades are always a sort of a lagging indicator, and usually like a 1 year lagging indicator. So like next year, Jennings Dunker is going to be, if he comes back, if he doesn't go to the NFL, he's going to be a first team All Big Ten offensive lineman. I don't think he's going to get that recognition this year, but he should. He's been blocking at an All Big Ten level. He will get that preseason accolade next year once all the coaches come together and say, "Oh, wait, this guy's awesome." So I get that Higgins deserved it last year. He might just end up getting it this year, even though the stats are not as sexy as they were last year. But yeah, he's just a better linebacker. He's going to make some NFL team really, really happy.
last thing we got to talk about before we get out of here, Adam. Drew Stevens was awesome today. Best game of his
Through the
career.
shoe.
Finished
Yeah.
5 of 5, and that ties the I think single game record. I included that in my article since 2004. I couldn't tell you who the kicker was in 2004. Can you tell me?
Kyle Schlicker.
All
Schlicker the
right,
kicker, baby.
there you go.
From
So
Schlicker the kicker to Drew the shoe.
yeah, he made field goals from 26, 27, 49, 50, and 54 yards. For those of you who were watching on TV, you did hear the announcers say that 54 yarder probably would have been good from 70. I mean, Drew, what did LeVar say? Something? It was like he's a lion ready to be let out of the cage or something earlier
Yeah.
this season. And right around that time, he had missed a couple pretty deep field goals, and it's just kind of like, is it? Is that? Yeah, but now he's just been so consistent, and making five in one game is pretty awesome. Iowa doesn't win this game without Drew. Obviously, that's 15 points off the board, right? And a couple of them, you should expect him to make a 26 to 27, right? But with those win conditions at 49 and 50 and 54 yards and tying a career long of 54 yards, Drew was awesome today, and he got a tackle on kickoff, which I always love seeing the kicker get a tackle. And yeah, I mean Drew, I think that was exemplary of what LeVar Woods does with guys. Who was a walk on, looked like he was 12 getting on campus, coming from South Carolina, like all these things just stacked up to prove the type of coach that LeVar Woods is, and I think. Drew was just great today. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Yeah, there's a lot to get to here. The first of all, I got to start with the tackle on that kickoff though, because normally not only like yeah, I enjoy seeing kickers make those tackles too, but usually it's closer to a deer trying to tackle a Honda Accord on the highway. Like you might get it stopped, you might create some damage, but we know who's winning that fight. And no, like it
Right.
was a legit tackle by Stevens on this one, wrapped up, brought him to the ground, and did it right on the Iowa sideline. So the players are all like, ah, yeah, like, like clearly, like you and I enjoy seeing a kicker make a tackle. If it was a teammate, like a sideline's gotta love it. But yeah, and you mentioned the long kicks, and they were long kicks that Drew was missing, and that was you could understand the trepidation once those started to pile up because that's basically how his swoon at the end of last season started too. It didn't seem like he had fallen off the cliff from the start. It was just a like, Like, oh, one gets blocked here. Oh, it's a long one that was just a little bit off. And so it didn't feel like a cause for panic, just the way that this little mini, I don't even want to call it a slump, but the misses in this season didn't really feel like a cause for panic. But again, you could have said that last year. And so now for him to turn that around, he's starting to stroke those big kicks again. His mechanics look fantastic. Everything that LeVar Woods has said about him, kicking with confidence has come true. And yeah, that he really does seem like a tremendous asset to that special teams room. I think he's in line for a big senior season, and he is starting to show that sort of NFL caliber leg that really, really, I would say the distance between NFL kickers and college kickers is sort of the biggest stratification in terms of the NFL and college ball. Drew is starting to get up there. And he's not hitting from 58 quite yet, but like his misses are close. He's got the leg for it clearly. Like you mentioned, they said would have been good from 70. When he misses those 58 yarders, it's not because they're short. It's not even close to short. So it's going to be fascinating to see how he develops from here. But yeah, we're going back to 17 for 20 kicking. He is definitely going to be in that Groza discussion this year. It's probably going to be another sort of situation where it, travels to next year too. But Drew Stevens is an unqualified asset to that Iowa. I mean, to the team, not even the special teams room, to the team as a whole and everything that Kirk Ferentz wants to do. When you know that as soon as you're inside the 40, you can trust him to at the very least get the kick close, that opens up a whole lot for you.
It does. And with all of that taken care of, we did have a couple questions from some folks on our premium board. Golf Hacker chimed in and asked if he thought there were more stunts or more pressure today. And in that same vein, asking where Max Llewellyn fits in next season. First question, I don't know that there were more. It was more noticeable today. Like the pass rush seemed like they were on a mission. Both sides of the offensive and the defensive line for Iowa appeared like they were on a mission today. I think they had
Yeah.
the clear advantage as well in the trenches on both sides of the football. I mean, that's just an Iowa thing, and I mean, Adam, we saw the crowd in Maryland. That's not exactly a football school. So, and you're not a football school, it's hard to get big dudes to come play for you, you know? So, I think Iowa just had the advantage from the start. Also, just kind of playing like their hair was on fire. Like I mentioned, Ethan and Max Llewellyn, and Max to me where he fits in next year is starting as a pass rusher. He's their best pass rusher this year. In my opinion, I think you roll with Deontay and Ethan for a reason. They've been around, they've been doing it. This is Max's first real season in the rotation. He was a little bit last year, but now you're seeing him get to be unleashed a little bit. Kelvin calls it giving those guys latitude. Kelvin Bell does, and once they've really known their role, he gives them that opportunity to play with a little bit of freedom. And we're seeing that with Llewellyn today. Two QB hits, one big one, or well, two big ones. The one that caused the interception to Jay. There was that incompletion in the first half, and then he finally got that sack. And man, he's a physical specimen, dude. Like he's probably not. I think I saw it might have been Doctorman saying that Max wasn't quite Anthony Nelson, but he's just got a little bit of that in him, right? He's got the technical stuff, and I think you can always improve your bag there. But Iowa will be in probably better hands than we expect next season based on what Llewellyn and Brian Allen have done. They've both got the physical tools at the very least, right? They're both nasty, and I think you can expect a guy like Kenneth Merriweather to step up next year as a defensive end. And maybe a Caden Crawford. It's kind of up in the air who that second unit will be, but especially if Aaron Graves doesn't come back, but I think he should. So on the defensive line as a whole, but that's where I see Max fitting in next season.
Yeah, you mentioned that he's got the physical tools. He's starting to put it together like Anthony Nelson, who, by the way, is thriving in Tampa Bay, I believe, currently. But like, yeah, he is a certified NFL dude. It's funny though, because when Llewellyn was coming out of Urbandale, I had been talking to a coach in Urbandale last season, and we were talking about current Jayhawks on the Hawkeye team, and he was saying that when Llewellyn was in middle school and even early in high school, he was not that like OMG, like this kid's clearly headed for big things. Like obviously he's got the frame for it, but that it wasn't as immediately apparent as it is for a lot of these guys who, make that leap and are these big time prospects. And so it is a credit to obviously his own growth, credit to Urbandale and also the Iowa Strength and Conditioning Program for getting him, to that level where he's really unlocking these gifts. He's finding a lot of ways to get that pressure. I mean, my guess is he wasn't ripping that spin move in high school, right? So,
Not like that
uh,
anyway. Not like that.
not certainly not like that, because if he was, we would have been hearing about it. It is an absolutely devastating move. But you talk about the development that happens in Iowa's program, and Max Llewellyn, just like Ethan Herkett, I think those two guys are as emblematic of that as anybody. Herkett today, by the way, his what he brings to this team, and I think it was typified by a scramble that Morris wanted to make. It looked like a wide open scramble. This would have been in the fourth quarter at this point. Uh, and Herkett, who has stunted to the outside, effectively seated contain, recovers from that, makes the stop, wraps up Morris for what ended up being, I want to say, a 4 or 5 yard gain on the scramble. But Morris was running through a probably 15-foot hole off that left side, off that tackle, because Herkett had been trying to rush the pass. And so for him to be able to close that gap with such violence, for lack of a better term, on a quarterback as athletic as Morris, right? Well, like we're talking about a guy who can do some damage in the open field. I mean, that when you have that sort of a playmaking radius as a defensive end, it opens up a lot for your defense. It opens up a lot of playmaking. You can do a whole lot of things. So yeah, the development that we've seen from Llewellyn, the development that we've seen from Herkett is going to make this team a monster in playmaking, especially coming off that edge next season. Because ultimately, when you're trying to force turnovers, today was a perfect example. What do? You start with pressure on the quarterback.
There you go. We will wrap it up there. We appreciate you tuning in to this episode of HawkCast brought to you by Iowa.Rivals.com and Hawkeye Beacon. If you're not a premium subscriber yet, you can get, well, all the intel that we shared today right when we get it at Hawkeye Beacon, as well as intel on recruiting and much more than what we just share here on the podcast. So you can do that today, Iowa.Rivals.com/subscribe. We'd love to have you there. That is in the description if you want to click it and join us today. If you're listening on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button, drop a like, drop a comment. Let us know how you're feeling about Stratton and his debut as Iowa's starter, the win over Maryland. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you're listening, make sure you hit that subscribe button because you might be listening but not subscribed. That way you get every episode, you get notified to listen to us here at HawkCast. Leave that rate and review as well. Does truly help us out a lot, and we do appreciate it. Once again, folks, I am Eliot Clough at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined by Adam Jacoby. For now, we will see you next time.